músicos son to stay
Yeah,
on?
Mike.
Council members, please take their seats. Oh. We'd like to bring to order Albany Common Council meeting for Monday, July 16th, 2018. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane. Mr. Applyrs.
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
And in this moment of silence, I would ask that we do think about what our city and family members, the loved ones who've lost loved ones these last couple of weeks through violence. And we also remember those who are actively in those communities coming up with solutions and working hard to make their community safe with not just hope, but with answers. And that we remember everyone in this city who is trying to be part of the solution. And that we always look inside ourselves and realize that when we work together, we will get things done. So please join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we move to the agenda of public comment. People, can you please step up, state your name, your address. You have 5 minutes to speak upon any topic you choose to. And please respect the chair. When I say you have a minute, I will warn you when you have a minute left during your speaking process. With that being said, can the clerk please call the first speaker?
Mr. Marlon Anderson.
Good evening, members of the public, members of the council. My name, of course, is Marlon Anderson, community advocate here in my role as community advocate in the city of Albany. I reside at 214 Lark Street in the Center Square neighborhood currently. I'm here to speak at length about the situation in the city of Albany. As you well know, I have come before you in recent months admonishing you about leadership in the city and how badly it is needed and the power of leadership. And never more has leadership been needed in this city than now, when the streets are virtually in chaos, where the head does not know what the tail is doing, and where people are looking for answers. The answers are here to be had. The question is, are we actively seeking them? Answers are not going to be found in prayer circles in parks. Answers are not going to be found on street corners and street memorials. Answers are going to be found through leadership and aggressively addressing the issue. And when the issue in this community is the community itself, How do you expect the community to do any better when you look at the state of it? This violence is a product of the environment it springs from. Our neighborhoods like West Hill, Arbor Hill, and the South End continue to look like Brazilian favelas. And yet, you can't understand the crabs in the barrel mentality, because that is what's embroiling in our streets right now. Crabs in the barrel mentality, everyone climbing over each other to get nowhere, to get to the top of the barrel. That's what this is. That's what this is. It's crabs in the barrel mentality. And of course, while this violence goes on, what does our community get in response to it? Exploitation and cries for more exploitation. How much money does the police department need? How many men do the police department need? The police has $1 million budget. They have backup from the state police. And yet, here's the police union crying for more money and more police. And compare the police budget with the community budget. How many millions of dollars are not in the community budget that could be going towards addressing the chaos in the streets, the lack of community centers in the city, the lack of activities and actions to address our youth? These are things that need to be addressed. When it comes to the snug model, snug has been a great Band-Aid and a good thing to trot out by Trinity Institution and others, but again, the snug model, if it is going to solve the problem of violence and not just be something that they use as a means to say, hey, we're trying to do something, the snug model must change. The snug model must change, and that should be well apparent by what has went on in the last few weeks. It has to change if it is going to solve and be part of solving the problem. But the fact of the matter remains, there must be greater leadership in this city from this building on this issue, because people are dying in the streets. I myself am going to be approaching the mayor as soon as possible to try to put together a major summit, and I hope the media will be interested in participating in that, because we need all our resources to participate in this. This is the time for leaders to step up, leaders who have the power to take action. Again, as I said, it's not going to be solved on the street corners. It's not going to be solved by Curtis Sliwa coming into the city to exploit and virtually pimp our communities. It's going to take leadership. The city is crying out for leadership. Where are the leaders?
You have 1 minute, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. And that is the question that needs to be answered. We need leadership to step up. We need leadership to organize. We need leadership to pull together and show people that this is an issue that we're engaged on and we intend to conquer. But if the leaders aren't there, if the leaders are invisible, then why would you expect the people to care when the leadership doesn't care? So again, I'm calling for the mayor to join me in putting together a summit about this violence, to talk about the violence in the community. And I'm asking my partners in the media to be interested in getting involved, because until we put a bright focus on this darkness that's enveloping our city, it's going to continue and it's going to spread. I want to thank you, and please get it together.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the next speaker.
Good evening, Mr. President, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Steve Riley. I am a taxpayer, a resident. I am a final candidate for the chief of police position. I'm the only candidate from Albany. I'm here to address the issue regarding increasing the chief of police pay raise. As both a taxpayer and a city resident and a former deputy chief of the Albany Police Department, I have some significant issues, I believe, with that.
Mr. Riley, can you please speak in a microphone?
Sure.
It's hard,
Oh, I'm
it's
sorry.
hard to hear with the air conditioner. Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I retired in 2013. I spent 9 years as our deputy chief of police in our police department in our city. Some of my accomplishments are the development of the community policing plan that is currently in existence and being followed. That plan also includes the development of the Neighborhood Engagement Unit, our strategic plan, and our overall community policing philosophy, which as an observer and a citizen, I believe needs a jump start. And I myself have some ideas that I'd love to share with you on things that I believe should be done. As a candidate and a resident, I have to acknowledge a bit of surprise in learning about this agenda item regarding an increase in the pay raise. As a final candidate, I know that the topic of pay raises never came up. I do know from more than one member of the selection committee that I am more than qualified for the position and that my interview was impressive. I have a copy of my resume for each person here who's interested in reviewing my qualifications and speaking with me about some of the ideas I have to improve public safety. I want to make it clear that I don't believe that now is the time to raise the pay when we have so many significant issues. I don't think now is the time to be talking pay raises when we have the issues developing in our streets and we have the economic condition that we're facing. Our mayor has the unfortunate task of having to go up the street and beg for money for us to close budget gaps. With that in mind, I have a difficult time as a taxpayer and a resident understanding why now would be a good time to start increasing people's executive level pay their pay scales. We have a significant number of city workers that I think we all know have not received significant pay raises in quite a while. Clearly, we have an economic situation that we have to attend to. As a taxpayer, as a former police officer, I can't help but look at some of the other places we could spend that money. I took the time to write it down. I think extra money could be spent on housing improvements. I think the extra money could be spent on employment opportunities. I think extra money can be spent on improving our youth programs, investing in services, hiring a public health professional to come in here, because this is a public health issue. And perhaps we can have somebody do a root cause analysis of what's really taking place. I think we all know on the surface what's taking place, but how about attacking a problem at the root once we know exactly what it is? That's what I think needs to be done. And I'm willing to accept this position without a pay raise. And I'm not here because I suddenly have nothing to do and I want a job. I'm here because I'm a resident. I'm here because I care. I'm here because people are getting hurt. People are getting killed. I'm here because I think the police department's resources could be used more
You have
effectively.
1 minute remaining.
And I'm willing to do that. We can accomplish so much together, working together. I don't need to be enticed with a pay raise to help you, help me, and our department solve problems. That's why I'm here tonight. My resume is right here. I outlined some ideas on a plan that I have to mitigate some of this violence that's taking place, and I welcome the opportunity to introduce myself to each one of you individually and speak to you about my ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you like, you can hand that over to the clerk. Those envelopes, sir, your resume, you can hand over to the clerk. Thank you. Gets off, yeah, it's kind of hard to, yes. Turn one, can we turn one on more? Thank you. Can the clerk please call the next speaker? Yep.
Merton Simpson.
Mr. Simpson, we noticed that you signed up twice for 2 different subjects, so unfortunately, County Legislator, you have to speak on both topics within 5 minutes.
Not a problem, not a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Legislator. County Legislator Simpson.
My name is Merton Simpson, and I'm the Albany County Legislator for the 2nd District, which encompasses most of Arbor Hill, part of West Hill, Sheridan Hollow, and touches on the Tenbrook Triangle. I initially came to speak on the I-787 project, but I heard that there was going to be some discussion on the violence that has been occurring recently in our community. So I don't have a problem speaking on both. I am not against inherently the I-787 project. What I am concerned about is the unforeseen consequences that can occur if the project is not implemented correctly. If I could use an analogy, when Erastus Corning first proposed the Answers plant, a week before he got approval by DEC to do it, a larger plant had been closed in Hempstead, New York. Corning convinced people that the burning of garbage wouldn't be a problem in Albany because he would burn it at a higher temperature and therefore eliminate the contaminants. Well, years later, we have a proposal to have 2 fossil fuel processors deliver toxic fumes to the community. And through extensive research, we've shown that there's a way to provide energy in a way that will do no harm and be cost effective, or a way to do it that will cause tremendous harm, be anachronistic, and actually not be cost effective. The I-787 proposal is premised on the idea that there are parts of the community that are underutilized. What I hope is being taken into consideration is that when they count the utilization of the people who use the access and egress, they don't forget about the fact that a large percentage of the people that they are undercounting are the people who actually live in the community. There was a time when the Albany community that's targeted, the Clinton Avenue area, was a vibrant community. I think it's a question on a cost-benefit analysis whether we can take the most densely populated areas in our city, decimate that tax base, and not have a tremendous negative impact on the county, and at the same time think that there's going to be some kind of a positive outcome by gentrifying a downtown area for bicycle paths and pedestrian walkways. I think we have to look seriously at how we use our dollars. I think it's early enough in the project that the questions about whether the residents in the community are going to get their equitable share of the jobs, whether the re-trafficking of how things flow is going to be a decimation to the already blighted community, and whether ultimately the ability to gentrify the downtown area is going to be coupled with an area to revitalize the heart of the inner city, which is where the most densely populated concentration of people in the county live. Now, as it refers to the issue of the recent tragic shooting events in our community, we have to understand from a historical perspective, America was found in violence. This is not a new thing. When I was interviewed last week by Channel 10, along with one of my other colleagues, and we were asked about the viability of the guardian angels, it was very clear to me that when you have an inside situation, a family situation, you're not going to get a good resolution from someone outside of the community. And I posed the question to the reporter, when it comes to issues of family conflict, how did it work out in Vietnam? The Irish Republican Army was founded in 1919. That was
You have 1 minute left, County Legislator Simpson.
How much time?
1 minute.
1 minute. What I want to say is that there are no group of people that have a monopoly on depression, violence, and auto-destructiveness. The key is what happens at the family level. Over time, we have lost civility in this country for a number of forces that we don't have the time to talk about. The answer, though, is right here. Marcus Garvey used to say, when all else fails to organize people, conditions will. I think this is a moment of serious gravity where the leaders of this community can come together with the residents of the community and parent the way we used to when the community was really a village.
Thank you, sir. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Mark Robinson.
Thank you. My name is Mark Robinson, former council member for the 5th Ward in the city of Albany. I came here tonight looking for solutions and to have a conversation with all 15 of the Common Council members. When you go to look for the solutions is already right in front of you. I am here to say that there is no gang in Albany, New York. The reason why I say there's no gangs in the city of Albany, New York, because this is the second time or third time that we've been faced with this. In the past 2 times, we had families that lost 30 kids. We had families on the South End that lost, I think it was 26 kids through a wave of violence, and they was labeled as gang members. The reason why I state that there's no more gangs in the city of Albany, because there's no leadership. There's no big homies. There's no leaders. What you have now, you have a group of 1 or 2 youth that mob up and have guns. Then over here you may have 2 or 3 youths that gang up and have guns. They're not about standing on a street corner and hustling because they have guns. And their main intention is, why would I have to stand on a corner and hustle for a living, and I'm a shooter. I have a gun. I would just take it. So be very careful when you loop the present wave of violence with the past wave of violence, because we don't want parents, right, who have already lost their kids at an early age, 16, 17, 18, to long federal prison sentences on the pretense that they are organized. There's no organization because there's no big homies, there's no leaderships. Again, like I said, you have groups of young individuals who mob up in 1s and 2s, 2s and 3s, and may feel that that was a big homie that lost his life. And they feel that they need to get revenge for this big homie that lost his life. But the big homies that lost their life is no longer gang affiliated. So it's not a gang thing, you know. It's a generation, I mean, it's many layers that we have to peel off to try to get to the underlying substance of why there's so much violence in our community. And again, you know, just recently you have babies that has been shot, 14, 15-year-olds. Okay, them 14 and 15 years olds, they don't have no parents. They are raising themselves. Okay, so if you don't have no parents in your home to say, hey, it's 11 o'clock, do you know where your children are at? You know, of course they out there and they running mischief and they running mayhem. It's a very delicate situation. We have a lot of people in the community is grieving. You had 3 deaths in the course of a week. So therefore you got 3 different mindsets of people that's angry, that's frustrated, you know what I'm saying, that's talking revenge, and they don't even know who they're going to revenge about. They don't even know the substance of why they want to get revenge to begin with. When these gentlemen that lost their lives, they stood for change. They didn't stand for gang activity. You know, so please be careful when you push for more enforcement. Please be careful when you say, hey, we need help from the state and we need help from the feds, because we don't want what happened, you know what I'm saying, to 30 families in the West Hill area and 26 to 28 families in the South End area.
You have 1 minute left, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. They lost their children, you know what I'm saying, to a system. Their children came home, and being creatures of habit, what do? When we come home, we migrate back to what we know best. So again, like I say, it's here. It's right in front of you. You know, it's in the form of a CBA. You know, you about to pass funding for the Palace Theater. You know, what one of the 15 council members is on top of this community benefits agreements that was in place during the last council. Okay, you have millions of dollars of city resources that's outsourced annually to outside contractors. Where's the procurement, you know what I'm saying, or where is it, you know, stipulated that, you know what I'm saying, receiving these tax dollars, that a certain percentage of these jobs or these training programs go to the community and the residents of the community where you are doing these building at. And again, thank you for your time, but it's right there in front of you. Just look at the legislation, you know what I'm saying, and find out a way that we can, because it's up to you, because you finna pass legislation for funding for the Palace Theater. But you have a community benefits agreements that's out there that no coalition of stakeholders to this day
Time's up,
has
Mr.
been
Robinson.
assembled. So that's where it is. It starts at
Thank you.
home, but again, it starts in the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Thank you. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Thank you. Dennis Carius, and I would really like to reform things when they ever get dysfunctional. If you're ever getting brainwashed by mainstream media, we could have 3 channels out there that would be fantastic. It used to be channels 16, 17, and 18, public access, education, and government, where we could actually see this meeting right here on the government channel. So we really, if you're ever getting brainwashed by mainstream media, our channels can tell the truth. So we really would like things to go in a good direction, and we would really like to ask for your help. It was said, the studio in Albany, it was at the main branch of the Albany Public Library, when a coordinator, who's the worker there, when he left, it closed, not for a week or a month, it closed for over a year. It was really sad. And one of the best things that we could do, now that we haven't been paying a coordinator for a year, there's a lot of money that has not been spent. That coordinator will be done in, well, I shouldn't say done, in about 4 months, he'll be halfway there. Can we hire a second coordinator? So instead of having one coordinator working for 12 months, can we just, when this coordinator now is on his 6th month, halfway there, can we hire a second coordinator for another 12 months? So if any of them leave, like it has happened in the past, instead of closing the studio for a whole year, you'll still have someone working there for 6 more months. That gives you 6 months to replace the one that did leave. And that really could help. It's so sad. It used to be channel 16, 17, and 18, but now if you go on Spectrum and you click the up from channel 15 and say I want to go up, it jumps up to 19. There is no 16, 17, and 18 anymore. They have moved it way up there, 1301, 1302, 1303. But even though for channel 6, 10, and 13, they're up there in, in the 1200s too, but they never took them away from 6, 10, and 13. Why do they have to take them away from channel 16, 17, and 18? There's no reason for it. Those channels are empty right now. So we're just asking if you could please help us just, get things back together the way they were before, and reform things if they ever get dysfunctional, so we don't get brainwashed by mainstream media. We can tell the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Hello, Jason Mudford from Ward 13 of Albany. Mayor Sheehan campaigned on the slogan, "We are a city of neighborhoods." But this is a time when the separate neighborhoods must become one whole city. I agree with Mr. Anderson. There must be leaders and leadership. There must be community advocates, but there must also be a community as a whole. one that can embrace our differences as we also embrace our similarities. And that starts with every citizen taking leadership in their own lives and in the lives that surround them. Last meeting, I spoke about an online kerfuffle, and my key point was how every citizen must bring civility to our shared lives online. Since then, we've had so much violence offline and in our streets. And still, the message, every citizen must bring civility to our shared lives, applies there as well. I'd like to propose a thought meant to resonate long after the gavel ends this meeting. There is a student creed written by Chike Akua that I'd like to adapt for the citizens of Albany. The first line normally says, I am a student seeking to be a scholar, but I'll be substituting 2 words. I am a citizen seeking to be a solution. The standard is excellence today and tomorrow. I am on a mission to elevate. I am disciplined, focused, and on time. I am organized, respectful, and responsible. I am on a mission to elevate myself, my community, and humanity. Let me say that last line again as we think about civility. I am on a mission to elevate myself, my community, and humanity. I hope every citizen of Albany in these times can think that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Conti, we've reached our 30-minute time limit. We have 2 speakers left.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion that we extend public comment period for additional period not to exceed 30 minutes.
All those in favor? Motion passes. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Alana Klein, 29 Glenwood, 12208. I've gotten to know a majority, if all, of this council for the past 7 to 12 months. And I think you know me pretty well enough to know by now that I speak my mind, I speak the truth, and I put a lot of thought into my comments. Up until mere hours ago, mere seconds ago, I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I've drafted and redrafted my comments over and over in my head, thinking what I was going to say. It went from anger to sadness to scapegoating. But yesterday, I came across something on Facebook that kind of wrote my comments for me. Quote of the day: sometimes you'll never know the value of a moment or person until they become a memory. I never knew Elijah Cancer, but I've seen so much outpouring of support that I feel I could do. I went to his funeral and it was moving. The church was standing room only. There were probably at least a couple of thousand people there. And I'm not here to speak for the black experience or to tell you it's my job to tell you how to solve this problem when I live in the 9th Ward and these problems are happening in the lower wards. I'm here to voice my support for however you need my help, however you need my voice. But I want to call on members of the upper wards, particularly the white population in the upper wards. As the previous speaker said, we are one city, we're one community. We might be divided into separate wards, but we're one community, and if anyone doesn't think that violence in the lower wards will affect them just because you live in the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, or the 15th, I have some news for you. Elijah Cancer was killed a mile away from where you're sitting right now. This affects all of us. And I believe we just saw an example of white privilege happening right before our eyes. I realize it's your prerogative to speak on whatever topic you want, but every meeting, or almost every meeting, someone speaks about Channel Albany We know how you feel. We know it's a frustrating situation, but with what's going on in the city, that was completely disrespectful to all the families involved. One person took one person's life the night that Elijah Cancer was killed. Thousands of people showed up for his funeral. This affects all of us. And in case you haven't figured it out by now, the quote of the day, sometimes you'll never know the value of a moment or a person until they become a memory. You know where I found that? Elijah Cancer's Facebook page, 36 hours before he died. Boycott the NRA. Black Lives Matter. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the next speaker.
Charles Obar Robinson. Thanks to the Times Union, I got a nickname, a brand called the Notorious Robinsons, a brand that we don't get paid for, but that's another story. Anyway, it's been real interesting since the last time I spoke in my community, a community that I lived in all my life. I had an opportunity. I had several opportunities to leave this community, but I always knew and believed that I was going to be the first one from this community to acquire some wealth. I believe I was going to be the first minority from this community to take care of this community, because that's what I do on a daily basis. I feed other people besides myself. I went to a meeting concerning what was happening in my community a couple weeks ago, the first time, and I said I would never put myself in that environment again around my own people and our mayor. Well, my own people booed me in front of our mayor. That's what they did, because my own people feel a certain way about my family because of the way we've been portrayed in the Times Union about a lie for over 40 years. But that lie that was created, in my community is still responsible today, because it's called systemic. And once that lie was created, I was not able to practice nepotism in my community. I was the only one in my community, staying in my community to give someone in my community a job. I was the only one doing that. I was trying to employ other people. I came to the city. The city never once guided me in a direction to help me. The only thing they ever practiced was supremacy, because it was the only thing they ever knew. I understand that now. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. Why? Because what happened in my community in the last 2 weeks was a telltale sign of how everything starts at the top, doesn't it? Everything starts at the top, but it seems to change when it comes to our community. It seems to change. The rules seems to change when it comes to our community. It seems to change. Now, solutions to a problem that been designed in 1938 when they came up with the New Deal. This is a result of something that happened before you were even born. This is the climax in 2018 of redlining in a community that they call a ghetto. It's $1 million houses in West Hill. The only thing ghetto is the state of mind that was created from the previous administration. Now look, marijuana is about to be legal. And one of the things that I noticed most when I went to Arbor Hill yesterday, when Paul Tonkel showed up and Pat Fahey showed up, the first thing they said was what, Mr. Johnson? There's no money, there's no money. Both of them said the same thing, there's no money. There's no money for what? To put in my community? No. The only ban that they ever put on the only ban that they ever put on my community was giving the police more money.
You have 1 more minute, Mr. Roberts.
More money to the police that's the only solution that ever came to my community. We done gave the police so much in this community, we have too many police. Ask Paul Vanderberg, 350 for a town of 90-something thousand? That's a lot. Now listen, we need a resolution for a midnight basketball league in Arbor Hill and South End. We have to engage these kids at night. We taking away. No, we have to give them something. This time we have to give them something in order to connect to them and to show that we care. So all you people that make the decisions, it's not about more police this time, please. It's not about taking something away this time, please. It's about giving something to them.
Your time's up. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Matt Carey. Good evening. My name is Matt Carey, and I'm currently employed as an Albany police officer. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? I currently live in Anane, and I just want to stress tonight that my comments are my own and don't reflect the official position of the Albany Police Department and or the Albany Police Officers Union. My comments tonight concern Resolution 62, the transfer of funds which will affect a salary total in the police department for the 2018 budget, specifically a $12,000 interdepartmental transfer to increase the salary of the chief of the Albany Police Department. The current salary of the police chief is $122,000, and should this resolution pass, the new salary will be at least $134,000, which I think everyone can agree in here is a rather substantial increase. It has been said that the purpose of this potential salary increase is to attract the best pool of possible candidates for the position of police chief. It can also be reasonably inferred that the current salary simply isn't competitive enough to attract candidates. Otherwise, this resolution wouldn't be necessary. While it's understandable that the citizens of this city deserve the best, most qualified police chief for its department, I have to ask, will this administration apply this progressive, forward-thinking resolution and apply it to the remainder of the Albany Police Department? And by that I mean the police officers, detectives, and supervisors that are the backbone of the Albany Police. I would hope that everyone here agrees that the chief of police, whoever that ends up being, can't do it alone, no matter how well compensated they might be. And that he will need a force of police officers behind him that should be the best qualified. And I got to tell you, it's harder and harder to say that with a straight face. I also have to tell you that after 21 years as an Albany police officer, it's getting more difficult to attract and retain a talented pool of police officers. Recently, I had a discussion with my coworkers that we are 30 officers short, with a number of young officers, our best and brightest, leaving for other departments. And I also have to tell you that I believe there are currently, out of our current numbers, I believe there are at least 50 that can retire tomorrow if they wanted to. When I took the civil service test 22 years ago, I was competing with over 1,000 other people for a position on the Albany Police. Today, my fellow officers tell me that we're struggling to find qualified people that want to be Albany police officers. I think you would be hard-pressed to find our neighboring police departments having these same issues at the extent that we're having them right now. In closing, I'm just asking you to remember the rank and file of the Albany Police Department when you consider that resolution tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. There are no other people signed up for public comment this evening, so we will deem public comment period closed at this time and move through our agenda with the approval of minutes from our previous meeting. Mr. Conti?
No minutes for tonight.
No minutes, thank you. Now we move to considerations of local law. Ms. Applyrs?
Thank you, Mr. President. I recognize local law D and request its reading and passage, please.
Can the clerk please read the local law?
A local law amending Part 33 of Chapter 42, Part 33, Chapter 42 of the Code of the City of Albany in relation to a change in the name of the CPRB.
Is there any discussion on the local law? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane. Mr. Applyrs?
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin?
Yes.
Mr. Conti? Mr. O'Shea?
Yes.
Ms. Farrell? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Igo?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Kimbrough? Ms. Love?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
It's 14 affirmative.
Local law passes. Mr. Conti, I'm going to hold the, oh, sorry. My fault. It happens. Moving to reports of standing committees. Any reports? Mr. Igo.
Mr. President, just a reminder to the council that a week from tonight, there will be a meeting in the Law, Buildings, and Codes Committee to further discussion on the vacant buildings piece of legislation. Thank you.
Further reports? Reports of ad hoc committee? Okay. Move in consideration of ordinance. Mr. Conti.
Thank you, Mr. President. The ordinances on tonight's agenda are held.
Thank you. Move to considerations of resolutions. Start with Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice 517218R and ask for its passage.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Albany approving the city's grant application under the 2018 Hudson River Valley Greenway Conservancy Small Grant Program.
Is there any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs?
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin?
Yes.
Mr. Conti? Mr. O'Shea?
Yes.
Ms. Farrell? Mr. Flynn? Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Igo?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Kimbrough? Ms. Love?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Resolution passes. Ms. Love. Is this your resolution? Johnson, that's right. African American Cultural Center is in your district. My problem, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice 527218R, and I also ask for its passage.
Yes, sir. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the African American Cultural Center of the Capital Region, Incorporated, and its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for state assistance in funding the RISE project.
Any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs?
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin?
Yes.
Mr. Conti? Mr. O'Shea?
Yes. Co-sponsor, please.
Ms. Farrell? Mr. Flynn? Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Igo? Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Kimbrough? Ms. Love? Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes. Co-sponsor.
Resolution passes. Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you. I noticed Resolution 537218R, and I ask for its passage.
Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the Albany Water Board and its application to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for state assistance in funding the City of Albany CSO abatement and flood mitigation projects.
Is there any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin.
Yes.
Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson. It's 14 affirmative.
Resolution passes. Ms. Love.
I notice resolution 557218R.
54.
No, I'm sorry. 15R and ask for its passage.
Thank you, Ms. Love. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting Capitalized Albany Corporation and its application to New York State Homes and Community Renewal for state assistance and funding the North Pearl Street Corridor NYMS Target Area Program.
Is there any discussion amongst the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin. Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough.
Yes.
Ms. Love.
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
It's 14 affirmative.
Resolution passes. Mr. Johnson. Is this your resolution? Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, President. I notice 557218R, and I ask for its passage also.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the City of Albany in its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for state assistance in funding the Lincoln Park Pool Design Project.
Is there any discussion about the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin. Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson. It's 14 affirmative.
Thank you. Ms. Love, resolution passes. Ms. Love?
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice resolution 567218R and ask for its passage.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting Albany in its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for state assistance in funding the Skyway project.
Any discussion about the resolution? Ms. Love?
Thank you, Mr. President. After discussion in caucus this afternoon, I decided I'm going to vote yes on this resolution. It seems that we have time to hire a compliance officer because the project is not up until December. We have up until December. But I'm also asking that Councilman Robinson from the 5th Ward accompany me on this because we suffer the same needs in our ward. So I'm asking the council member to accompany me with these needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Love. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin. Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea. Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson. It's 14 affirmative.
Resolution passes. Ms. Love?
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice resolution 577218 and ask for its passage.
Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the Downtown Albany Business Improvement District and its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for state assistance in funding the Capital City Wayfinding Program.
Is there any discussion about the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs. Mr. Ballerin. Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson. It's 14 affirmative.
Resolution passes. Ms. Love.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Resolution 587218R and ask for its passage.
Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the Palace Performing Arts Center Incorporated in its application to New York State Homes and Community Renewal for state assistance in funding the Palace Theater renovation and revitalization project.
Any discussion about the resolution? Mr. Hoey.
Yes, I talked to the director of the Palace Theater after our caucus on Wednesday, and I was pleasantly surprised that they do reach out to the community. They have internship programs for the members of the community. So I'm very supportive of this and the next resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoey. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Mr. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin. Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea. Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
It's 14 affirmative.
Resolution passes. Last one for the day, Ms. Love.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Resolution 591718 and ask for its passage.
Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the Palace Performing Arts Center Incorporated and its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for state assistance in funding the Palace Theater renovation and revitalization project.
Is there any discussion among the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Mr. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin. Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
14 affirmative.
Resolution passes. Thank you. Mr. Conti.
Thank you, Mr. President. I noticed Resolution 60.72.18R and request its passage.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the Preservation League of New York State in its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for state assistance in funding the rehabilitation of 44 Central Avenue project.
Is there any discussion about the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
Yes.
Mr. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin. Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes.
Mr. Igo.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
It's 14 affirmative.
Resolution passes. Mr. Anane.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Resolution 617218R and ask for its passage.
Clerk, please read the resolution.
Resolution of the Common Council supporting the Women's Club of Albany Incorporated and its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for state assistance in funding the restoring of the WCA main entrance of Vital Gateway Anchor Project.
Is there any discussion about the resolution? Mr. Anane.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased to support the Women's Club of Albany in its application to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, Historical Preservation for financial assistance to restore the main entrance of the Women's Club. The building, built in 1895, is an excellent example of a Chicago Pride arts, crafts, style architect, and is listed on the State National Registry of Historical Places. Its beauty, contribution to Washington Park History District serves as a vital gateway anchor to the Pine Hills neighborhood, which I represent. The Women's Club Albany provides a space where women and individuals from the neighborhood can pull their time, expertise, and energy in support of their well-being and cultural enrichment of women and children in the Pine Hills neighborhood and throughout the capital region. The main entrance requires major and critical restoration work to ensure the safety of the building staff and guests, and to make the building handicap accessible. I am honored to recommend and support this project application for the New York State Investment and Financial Assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anane. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane?
Yes.
Ms. Applyrs?
Yes.
Mr. Ballin? Yes. Mr. Conti? Mr. O'Shea?
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Ms. Farrell? Yes. Mr. Flynn? Yes. Mr. Hoey?
Yes, co-sponsor.
Mr. Igo?
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Mr. Johnson? Yes. Mr. Kimbrough? Yes. Ms. Love? Yes. Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
It's 14 in the affirmative.
Resolution passes. Mr. Conti?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd now like to make a motion requesting majority consent to add Resolution 6272-18R and Resolution 6372-18R to tonight's agenda.
Do I hear a second? Second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. Ms. Applyrs?
Thank you, Mr. President. I recognize Resolution 6272-18R and request its reading, introduction, and passage, please.
Thank you, Ms. Applyrs. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council consenting to the transfer of funds which will affect the salary total in the Police Department for the 2018 budget.
Is there any discussion about the resolution? Seeing none, can the clerk, Mr. Igo?
Mr. President, I will be voting for this. I do have some concerns. And what I do like about it is when the mayor came to us and she said that this should not be only for the top, that it should go right down through the ranks. Especially the only thing that she can do at this point without negotiation with the union, we're concerned about the command staff, okay, that there are officers in the ranks, okay, lieutenants, whatever, that don't want to go up because they will be losing money because they won't be getting the overtime. So I'm voting on this with the premise that raises will be filtered down throughout the department because I think it is much needed, as was said by, I believe, Officer Carey tonight. But I know the rest of it has to be negotiated. I know we don't get involved in negotiations. So that's my reason for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Igo. Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, I believe that all our police deserve more money, and I know we're in fiscal hard times, and the next recession is going to be even worse. But to attract the best, we have to have decent salaries. And there's an old saying in the union movement that a rising tide raises all ships. So we have to start somewhere, and I think this is a good start, and I'm going to be supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I keep hearing we have to have larger salaries to attract the best, and I'm still waiting to see the best from these salaries that we have been paying out thus far. So as a person who is a voice from our community, and we keep on hearing that we don't have money constantly, time again, I just don't understand how we are at the same bargaining point for people who have never proven themselves to the city. When we have people who have dedicated their lives to the city and have worked for long periods of time without raises, and so for me, I'm troubled with this vote, and I'm still undecided which direction I'm going to go in for that basis, because I just find it problematic for a person who has never lived in the city of Albany to come here and get these raises. And if I'm correct, a lot of times so far to this point, the people that have gotten these raises are from outside of our community. So I'm indecisive down to the last minute in terms of what direction I'm going in, and I support the policemen, but at a time when whenever the discussion about funding from the city, you just constantly hear that we have no money, that money is the issue, but we're hearing that we're going to make an increase on these positions to attract people from outside of our community, and I just feel like we have some fine ladies and gentlemen that are working for the current force, and all my life, I can't remember us going outside the city for a police chief, and I just don't understand why the direction is constantly that we have to go outside of our city for leadership. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Kimbrough.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Mr. Ballerin.
I think Chief Shears said it best at our last caucus, that the heart of our force is our patrolmen. It's the men and women that are out there every day walking the beat. I'm willing to look at the resources that we have, because it always comes down to resources. It always comes down to what resources we have and how we have to find new revenue to deal with new expenses. So we're putting in a new expense here. I think everyone here, for the most part, wants to support our officers to get that raise. So it's going to be us working on it in October and September of how we find that revenue to actually make it happen. And that's putting it right back on us as well. And it's not going to be easy conversations to have, but if we actually want to move things forward, it's those type of difficult conversations that we're going to need to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ballerin. So no other further discussion? Oh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just briefly, whoever the next chief is going to have a number of issues to deal with, a number of challenges, et cetera. But clearly, one of those challenges is also dealing with the pay structure within the department, not just at the lower end, the rank and file, but also with in terms of the command staff and moving forward. So he or she will have a number of challenges. Pay is probably, salary structure is probably amongst the most important ones to attract and retain a quality police force, because that's what the city deserves. And I really admire the men and women who serve in the department, and we want to make sure that they're adequately compensated. And then they want to make the Albany Police Department a career and stay here and serve. So that's one of the challenges. I'll support the resolution with the understanding also that the discussion we had was that this is really part of a larger issue of compensation and the pay structure that needs to be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conti. Can the clerk please call the roll? Can you raise your hand a little higher? Can't see you down there, good brother.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Again, I echo the sentiments of my colleague Derek Johnson. I keep hearing that we want to attract, but I like to hear the conversation that we want to keep, and we want to promote. Our current Albany Police Department is some of the hardest working individuals in our city. And I believe we all always need to look inside first before we look outside for anything else. So tonight I will be voting no for this measure.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Going once. Gone. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Anane.
No.
Ms. Applyrs.
Yes.
Mr. Ballerin.
Yes.
Mr. Conti. Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Ms. Farrell. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Hoey.
Yes.
Mr. Igo. Mr. Johnson.
No.
Mr. Kimbrough. Ms. Love. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
No.
It's 13 affirmative, 3 negative.
Resolution passes.
Pardon me. 11 affirmative, 3 negative. Pardon my math. 11 affirmative, 3 negative. Thank you for whoever caught that as well with the resounding ooh. Yeah.
Resolution passes. Ms. Applyrs.
Thank you, Mr. President. I recognize Resolution 637218R and request its reading, introduction, and passage.
We're not. Intro, just intro.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Request that its reading and introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
Resolution of the Common Council confirming the appointment of Joseph W. Gregory as the Chief of Albany Fire Department.
Mr. Conti?
Thank you, Mr. President. That resolution is referred to the Public Safety Committee. And, Mr. President, the remaining resolutions on the agenda are held.
Thank you, Mr. Conti. Any miscellaneous business?
Yeah.
Mr. Anane?
I'd like to speak on my call today for the public safety emergency meeting. In light of the unprecedented recent violence in our city, this morning I called for an emergency meeting of the Common Council Public Safety Committee. As a legislative body, we as a council must be proactive, not reactive, to addressing this problem in our community. The past weekend, we had another person get killed on our city streets because of the continued gun violence. The shootings that took place the morning of July 5th was counted as the country's 214th mass shooting incident, according to the Mass Shooting Tracker website. This year, the number of Albany homicides has matched 2017. With this in mind, one of the key questions that my constituents in the 10th Ward asked of me, as well as Albany residents from other wards too, is how will the Common Council respond to this? And what can the Common Council do to help end the violence on our streets? It is in that context that I ask that we hold the Emergency Public Safety Committee meeting to ensure that we as a council have a role in shaping the necessary response to increase violence in our streets. While I'm grateful that the mayor and the police chief were able to address the council regarding the situation in person, we cannot put the burden of formulating an effective response solely on the mayor or the police chief. We are in this together, and I believe that all of us as council members should help in coming up with solutions. Lower ward, upper ward, doesn't matter what ward you live in. I ask that we hold the meeting to thoroughly investigate what we as a city are doing right and ensure what we are doing wrong as it relates to crime and public safety. Ensure that whether solutions are being implemented and effectively and just, and to allow our constituents an opportunity to engage in a committee on the direction of our city response to the surge in violence. Gun violence in particular has become an all too frequent occurrence. And we as a council must actively examine long-term solutions to reduce and eliminate this plague afflicting our city. We need to work swiftly to develop policies that ensure the lives are not senselessly lost to violence in our city. The lives lost to violence and the injuries sustained in our communities are unacceptable. No one should have to contend with or accept this as a normal way of urban life. All of Albany residents should have the expectation that we will be safe in every zip code and every neighborhood. Several months ago, when I took office, I met with individuals who understand how City Hall works and understand how government works. And they gave advice, and they said, Owusu, sometimes, although you want to change the institution, sometimes the institution can also change you. When I was running, I made a decision that I'm going to be independent leadership. I didn't get elected to go along, to get along. I came here to speak truth to power. If I deem it's necessary to send out a press release to call for a public safety committee meeting, I will do so. Again, people want answers. When you're walking around the neighborhood, and particularly in the 10th ward, they're not asking what the mayor is doing about public safety. They're not asking what the police chief is doing about public safety. They're asking, Owusu, what are you doing about public safety? I know I represent the Midtown neighborhood of Pine Hills. And people in the 10th ward are concerned that this violence is going to spill over. So if I'm calling for a public safety meeting and someone is thinking that it's for political reasons, you know, people are dying out in these streets. If you look at our schedule, we're not meeting all for this week as it relates to public safety. We have to address this matter. Some people say we want to play politics. There's 8 homicides. That's a fact. Certain neighborhoods, unemployment rate is as high as 22%. That's a fact. We have 56% graduation rate. That's a fact. You cannot play politics with facts. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Thank you.
Mr. Hoey.
It's kind of hard to follow my fellow my councilman, Anane. I've been struggling. This is my 6th month, and today's my birthday, by the way. I made it this long. I want to make it another few years, but I am frustrated. And in our previous meeting, our planning meeting before this one, you know, it came out that I'm stressed, but I am. I'm up in the Uptown wards, 15th Ward, but I have people that are afraid to come downtown Albany. I have the provost from the University of Albany calling me because, you know, I work there, wanting to know what's going on, that the people in the downtown campus are afraid to cross Central Avenue. So we do have a problem. Now, I don't know how much records we keep, but I've been bringing this up, that we have a serious police shortage. And I know there was a public comment, we have 350 police, but we're down. Okay, every time there's a shooting where a policeman's involved, they're taken off the road and put behind a desk. So we're down. We've had people retire. We've had people die, unfortunately. But we're down, I thought we were down like 26, 27 police, and Chief Sears last Wednesday said we're down 31. And I know we're down 6 detectives also. Now, I gave this story, and I'm telling it now to the public. There was a massage parlor I could see out my bathroom window. The people in the neighborhood were complaining to me, what's going on here? There's cars going in and out. There's a widow woman that lives right next door, told me there's people, these Johns are parking in her driveway. What are you going to do about it? So I investigated. I found out it was advertised on Craigslist. I looked it up. I called. I got all the information and gave it to our police department. I waited a month. Nothing happened. I told Frank Camiso Sr. about it. He's in my county ledge. He had the sheriff's department come in, and they shut it down that night. They opened it up again 2 days later. They shut it down again. Okay? I'm a common council member. I'm not a detective. So we definitely have a shortage. Now, I brought up to Chief Sears at the meeting. He said, well, we can't move people around. Okay? Well, who's investigating these problems? I had another problem. We have a mailbox on the corner of Hillcrest and Berkshire Boulevard. People were breaking into the mailbox, taking out checks, erasing the person that was supposed to get the check and the amount of money, and they wiped out a woman's savings account. She goes to the police. They said, it's not our problem. It's post office. She goes to the post office. They said, it's not our problem. It's the police problem. What was this person to do? She called Channel 10 News. They came, it went on the news, and all of a sudden everybody was tripping over themselves to try to help her out. Now, I got a document from the post office that says the police department is the local police should be investigating it and then work with the post office authority. I forwarded that over to Chief Sears, and when I was down in Pittsburgh over the weekend, he replied to me, and late at night, I might say, but saying that, well, my officers follow this procedure, but I know it didn't happen. Okay, I know there's a lot of, this person does it. Our police are overworked. It was in the paper. The detectives are working around the clock. They're exhausted. And all of a sudden we have a crime increase. Now, I can't prove that because we have a lack of police that the crime level has gone up. But, you just look at it and you think about it. Could there be a correlation? I believe there is. And I believe that we need to do something about it. Now, Chief Sears, and I know my fellow councilman brought up about there used to be 1,000 people on the list for being police. The test is only given every 2 years. We had less than 600, and what he said is it's going to boil down to, well, we might get 20 good applicants out of that list. That's a problem, and they're not going to even hire till October. So that means we're down 6 detectives, maybe 7, till October. We're down 31 police, and if there's another shooting where police involved, we're going to take more police off the street. So I think one of the things we need to do is to figure out, and I don't know how, maybe talk to Human Resources, can we do a test every year? Now, I know there's been a big push to get police applicants from minority neighborhoods, and I think that's what we need, that people look and they see people from their neighborhood serving on the police department. Being a policeman, you should not be ashamed. It should be a good job. You should be able to buy a house in your neighborhood and work in that neighborhood. We got to do good training. Now, there is, the police do get a bad rap, and I think a lot of it's to do with training. And maybe it's because they're frustrated. But, we had this whole thing about, the gentleman being killed. They make mistakes. They're human beings. But I think we can provide the city, when I say we, better training and more intervention models to take care of this type of violence. And one thing I want to throw out there, and I don't know how unpopular, and I might be chased out of this room right now, but have we ever thought about a curfew for kids underage? I work at the university. I'm a network engineer. We had a fiber optic cable go bad at the downtown campus. The only time I could fix it so I wouldn't impact people was 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a summer night. It was about 3 years ago. I'm down at the university out in the street, and there's little kids my son's age, 10 years old, 11 years old, riding around on bicycles at 1 in the morning. I mean, I would not have my own child out at that time. My son goes to bed at 8. Well, he fights me and tries to stay up to 8:39. But, we have a problem. And do we police people to that extent? But I don't know what to do. Having children out at night that are underage. I definitely agree that we need some kind of basketball program. We need more sports. I talked to the Council Member Flynn. We got to do some way we can keep our kids occupied in the summer. Maybe provide more gear in parks, stuff like that. But we do have a problem, and we do got to take care of it. You know, I do have ideas. Not every idea is a good idea, but if we follow through and work as a council, I believe we can do it. And, you know, there is a frustration out there, and one of the things I brought up last Wednesday, it's the city of Albany gets the bad rap. It's not the lower wards or Ward 3 or 4. It's the city of Albany. And we're a corporation in my own mind, and we have to market ourselves to people. We can't be the dangerous city where people don't want to invest, that they don't want to have conventions. We have a brand new convention center. If this violence continues, people aren't going to want to come here. And, you know, we got to think about that. And, you know, I can go on for quite a bit, and I don't want to just monopolize the microphone here, but I hope we can work together, and I really do. Like I said, I'm 6 months in. I feel I'm starting to get the swing of things, and you know, it's a pleasure to work with everybody here. And sometimes the arguments are heated, but at the end of the day, we're the Common Council. And I really feel that I'm part of a club. It's the Common Council Club, and we work hard for this city, and we're going to make sure it succeeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoey. Mr. Johnson.
You know, I want to echo the statement that Mr. Robinson said earlier about the Midnight Basketball League. I think it's officers here that remember many years ago when we had the Midnight Basketball League, and one thing for sure we could say, it took hundreds of kids off the street. We have valuable programming that's going on until 7, 8 o'clock. I just want to news to young kids don't want to go in the house at 7, 8 o'clock. If you look at the people that are committing these acts that we're talking about, they're not teenagers. They're not teenagers. And one thing that I would ask from the lower ward and from the upper wards is that we not go to a decision to take away, you know, everything has been taken away from our community. And, you know, at the time, the people who were sitting on the council from the upper ward, we didn't hear anything. So, you know, it's unfortunate what's going on in our community, but it's been a lot of unfortunate things that have been going on for a long time. You're going to hear me, you know, I hope it isn't received the wrong way because I didn't support the increase for a newcomer to our city. But you know what? When we did Midnight Basketball League, I think it went on for 2 months. It took all of $24,000. And you know what? I know a gentleman that's still working a job that was created out of the Midnight Basketball League. Yeah, it was basketball, but it was other components to it. They had to go to workshops. We had people come in and talk to them about things that will be pertinent to them being productive members of our community. What's going on today is a result of what has gone on for years and years and years and years. I stand here right in front of you, a product of what Albany used to present to the youth. And it's sad that, you know, when this conversation comes up, you know, we move anywhere. You know, we can meet all day long about what's going on in the community. We can have meetings, but that's not going to change the people out there that are making irrational decisions from moment to moment, because that's what it is. I know, you know, like I know people that know things, and the stuff that they're sharing with me, this is no rhyme or reason for what's happening. And that's, you know, and just in a personal, and we had a family member that hurt himself. People aren't just hurting each other. Some people are hurting themselves because they're stressed out, they're frustrated. So although we had 2 young men that were lost, we're losing people in our community that's not associated to gun violence. People are stressed out of not being able to provide for their own. And like I said, what message is it, you know, like, and I'm going to keep on saying it. What message are we sending to the people that dedicate themselves to the city, that people can come in here and on their first day, they're getting raises? Because people talk about that. People talk about that also. And it's important because, you know what, the morale of the city, if this chief gets this raise, how are the officers that's been here forever, how are they going to feel? And guess what? They're going to have to show them everything that they know. That's what people are saying to me. They're bringing people in here that we have to show them how to do their job. And that's not fair. And it's not right. And that's un-Albany. That wasn't how Albany was built. And we never had these type of problems before until we started turning it over to other people. If you look at the school district, they raised the expectations for teachers. Guess what happened? It was a drop in people wanting to be teachers. They raised the expectations to be a cop. Guess what happened? People don't want to be a cop anymore. Because you raise the expectations, but you don't raise the pay. So, you know, we're dealing with a lot of decisions that were made a long time ago that they're coming back to bite us. They took programming away from the inner city. They took the Arbor Hill softball park away from the inner city, because what's up there right now, even with the additions that they made, that's not the Arbor Hill softball field. We used to have youth leagues. You had a high school basketball league at Hoffman Park that the local high school players can play in front of the younger kids, so that it was an example of how you play the game. If you notice, if you go back and look at when they eliminated that league, I bet you Albany High hasn't won a championship since then. But you know what? You hear me talk about athletics because athletics afforded me a way out of this community. And I'm going to tell you like this, my plan wasn't to come back. February 13th, 1993 changed my life forever. My brother was murdered. So murder, you know, we've been losing people to murder for a long time. This is nothing new. It's just happening more frequently. And until we have a serious conversation about how are we going to reach these youth that's out here, this stuff is going to just keep on happening. But we're rebuilding all parts of the city except for where this stuff is happening at. People need jobs. People need help with their kids that they can't manage. And, you know, when you sit in a room and we say, oh, that's this person and that's that person, that's not helping us. You heard Marlon Anderson talk about leadership. That's what we are. We're the leaders of the community. And when we're out in the community, we should show people and we should speak positive of what we're trying to do. Because I know I'm not the only person that's trying to do something positive in this room. But, you know, we spend time when people get up and talk about things that's near and dear to their heart, they should be able to speak. Just like I have to listen to stuff that other people share, we should have the same opportunity whether we're sitting in here or we're in caucus, because we have to have this conversation, because without us having this conversation, we're going to keep on coming back to talk about sad situations. And to be honest with you, my emotions are all over the place, because every time something happens in the inner city, you know, I know those people because I'm Albany. So I saw a mother lose her son Friday night on her birthday, a sweet lady. I saw a father come up here from Charlotte, North Carolina, to go to a wedding, but instead he had to plan for his son's funeral. That's not how it's supposed to be. And it's not going to change for us talking about the things that we're talking about. We have to give these kids something. We have to send a message to the city that we are serious about trying to do something, instead of just having a meeting and people get a chance to voice their concerns, and we don't do anything with those concerns. Because before you know it, it's going to be another tragedy, and it's going to pull our focus in a different direction. And to be honest with you, sometimes lately I've been scared to go to sleep, because when I wake up, I've been hearing bad news. And that's near and dear to my heart, and that's what I took an oath of office for, to be loud and proud about the true needs of not just my community, but the whole city. And I will, you know, when people are in the upper wards, you know, we welcome support for things that before it gets to this point. And I just have to express that we do have to send a message to the community that we're going to do something to try to curb the violence. Thank you.
Ms. Love? Yes? Igo.
bad neck. But it would be an asset. It's just something that's missing. You know, you get 12, 15 good hoopers out of there or anything, whatever sport, whatever. It spreads. It gets people interested off the streets and everything. But the only thing I agree with, you know, I would love to see a chief come from the city of Albany, and there's one sitting in the room right now that could probably do the job. He has done it before, but that's the mayor's decision, not ours, and she sends a name up the same as she's doing with the fire chief, and we have to go from there, I believe. So I've had my discussions with her, but I'm going to let you know, you aren't alone in this. You want help, all right?
Thank you, Ms. Igo. Ms. Love.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Mark Robertson for his comments that he made on the rash of violence in the city. What he said there wasn't gang violence, was just spurts of killings that's going on, but there was no particular gang. I would like to say this, that just before I left the house, I had it on Channel 10 News, and Equan's Fallon's killer has been brought to justice. Councilman Robertson, it happened in his ward, but he asked me and his lovely wife to accompany him to visit Equan's mother, Jody Fallon. And I have to say, it was not pleasant for us to sit there and talk to a mother after she just lost her 20-year-old. It was not pleasant. But I have to thank Minister Robertson also. I have to call him minister sometime because he ministers us at our church. But anyway, I have to thank Councilman Robertson for asking me to accompany him to talk to Jody, because it was not easy. It was not easy sitting there talking to her. But I would like to say his murder has been brought to justice. So one murderer down. Thank you.
Mr. Conti, did you? I thought I saw your hand. Mr. Applyrs?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just first, I want to stand behind the sentiment I made in caucus. As the chair of the Public Safety Committee, I do not feel compelled to call a public safety meeting at the request of Councilman Anane. As was mentioned and discussed in the caucus, there have been mechanisms for communication and coming to the table with solutions. Several of those platforms have been facilitated and led by community members, and I firmly believe that council members should be supportive of the efforts that community members are leading. Some people think that just because you have a title, you are a leader. That is not the case. And some of the best leadership happens when you are able to follow. I also think that we have to change our perspective, that the solutions will come out of the four walls of City Hall. Asking for meetings to be had here about something that's so community-centric, I think, puts us back in a position where people sit around a table discussing the issues impacting other people, but fail to touch people where they are. I would also suggest for those council members who feel that they want to discuss solutions, pick up the phone, call council members who are more closely connected to the issues, go to a community meeting, look on Facebook, instead of expecting that you should be directly contacted, you should be directly invited in order for you to take part in the solutions. The other piece that I will mention is that I've heard a lot tonight. I, the council, my community, more police. That is not conversation that speaks to being collegial or being community-centric. It has been a lot about I and me and less about the fact that we have community members who are grieving the deaths of people who lost their lives to violence and the people who live in the trenches dealing with the violence every night. The last thing I'll talk about is this notion of some of the language that we use and how we have to check our ego, how we have to check our privilege, whether that is white privilege, whether that is privilege regarding where we live. We need to be responsible for checking our own biases, because I've heard a lot of mention about gangs and making blanket statements that what is happening in this city is gang-related, which some of it is not accurate. Also, we need more police. Our urban communities are over-policed and historically have been over-policed. When I spoke with the mayor about the resources deployed in terms of police resources, she confirmed that most of our police resources are deployed in the urban and lower wards. The police have been effective in our community and work hard. I will not detract, but the answer is not more police on the street. Hence why I employ my colleagues to get outside of the four walls of this council, get outside of their own insular communities, and be in tune with the people who are directly impacted to ask them what do they need and how can they be supported. Thank you.
Mr. Kimbrough. Anane?
Thank you. You know, I requested to have a public safety committee meeting, emergency meeting. I'm sorry. But the violence in the city of Albany is unacceptable. There's been meetings in Arbor Hill neighborhoods. There's been meetings in the South End neighborhoods. And meetings in neighborhoods that have been impacted by the gun violence. I'm simply requesting a meeting here where we could sit and talk about some solutions. All of us, professionals, there's a reason why we're here. If we can't lock ourselves in a room and come up with a solution, maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, just to sit together at a public safety committee meeting to talk about next steps moving forward, or what you've been hearing at the meetings, what you've been hearing at your meetings in the community, that's simply what I'm asking for. Like I said, I didn't come here to go along to get along. There are people in my community who want answers, and they're not saying that they want to hear from the mayor, not the police chief, but they're asking their council representatives, what are you doing? What is your colleagues on the council doing? Again, I'm sorry for calling for a public safety committee meeting. But the violence in this city, the homicides that are taking place, needs to be addressed. And I think that we have some of the brightest minds in here on the council. And if we work together, if we stick together, we can come up with solutions. I hate the notion that we have to come up with a solution before we meet for a public safety meeting. We could meet and discuss and come up with ideas that individuals are hating and are coming up with, and interrogate those solutions. Seems like there's a rush. It's like everything is rushed. We got to go. There's too much. We don't have enough time to meet about public safety. That's what I'm calling for. A public safety committee meeting. People all across this city are concerned, particularly in the 10th Ward, about the spillover that might happen if we don't address the public safety concern. Just the other day, I was in my neighborhood walking around, and someone told me they're nervous, they're afraid to go to Central Avenue. So if I send out a press release calling for an emergency public safety meeting, those are the people that I'm advocating for, my constituents. They want to see, what are we doing? Thank you.
Mr. Ballerin. Thank you, sir.
I think the concern is, and I'm going to be very honest and frank, the concern is, why do we need to do something when the media is here? Why do we need to do something to get the media's attention? The key of leadership is when you do something when nobody is looking. The neighborhoods, our neighborhoods, and let me tell you something, the 11th Ward is not what it used to be. Maybe people remember the 11th Ward as a different neighborhood, but the 11th Ward, the majority of the 11th Ward is under 12206, which is one of the most impoverished zip codes in our city. I have personally witnessed gun shootings outside my door, and I have had to walk and talk to neighbors who have kids who are fearful of our neighborhoods. So you don't have to explain to me the pain that we're dealing with. But we're not going to solve the problem by bringing in the media that has shown they don't even respect our neighborhoods. They're not part of the solution. We're supposed to be part of the solution. We're supposed to be working with our neighborhood associations. We're supposed to be working with our police department. We're supposed to be working with the stakeholders in our community to bring back some of these old initiatives that have gone by the wayside and take it right on the shin that it is all of our responsibilities, including my own, for every single loss of life that we have in this city. And when we do that, we're not asking for accolades. We're asking for results. For those who attended the meeting with me last night, you know the public does not have a very high aspiration of who we are. And that's very common for people who represent any office. Public officials are not respected like they used to be. And that's okay. We took that and we knew what we were getting into. But the reason we've lost some of the respect in our communities is because we've become clowns. We've seen what's been successful maybe all the way to our presidency, that all you care about is tweets and likes, and then that's what we focus on. When what we really need to be focusing on is what are the solutions that are going to improve our neighborhoods? How are we going to get the resources? And when I say get the resources, I mean bring in new revenue to support these programs. And every time we talk about bringing in new revenue, I don't forget $600,000 is 1% increase in our taxes. $600,000 in new revenue is 1% increase in our taxes. So we can talk and talk and talk. But true leadership is going to come when we have to make some tough decisions to bring in some new revenue, to deal with all these issues, to have those tough conversations with the YMCA. Joe, you mentioned the YMCA. I used to work for the YMCA. Those basketball programs that you're talking about, I remember running them. Maybe we need to bring our old stakeholders back into the fold and say, hey, let's do some of the good work we used to do. But what we cannot do is have bickering amongst ourselves about meetings or not meetings. We need to let that go. We need to drop it. We need to move forward. We need to move forward in a right direction because that's what the people want to see. They don't want to see us BS because that's what they think all we do. So I hope we can prove to them that we're better than that. Thank you.
Mr. Hoey?
I just want to, there was a few things said, and I just want to make sure my fellow council members understand me and where I come from. You know, my son goes to Eagle Point School. I could have sent him to Christian Brothers or one of these private schools. I wanted him to be part of the community. Eagle Point has 56% of its children below the poverty level. My wife was president of the PTA there, instituted a backpack program so kids wouldn't go home starving. I'm on the I just resigned from the building leadership team to help come up with the curriculum for that school. So I am out in the community. I was a soccer coach for the Albany Soccer Club, 5 years at Hoffman Park. And I've been working with Jack and Corey, trying to get that park fixed up because there's pieces of steel sticking out of the ground. And we want our kids running around and getting their holes in their feet or hurt, and that field is on a dump. So yeah, we are doing stuff. I'm out in the community, but there's got to be more done. I'm working 3 jobs, and this is my 3rd job, of course. I can't read Facebook all the time. I have barely time. I'll go home tonight and I'll pass out. I left Pittsburgh at 6:30 in the morning. So I want to do something. I want to be part of the solution here. But it feels like, oh, you know, you need to know what's going on. I need somebody to help me. Tell me when things are. I know Kelly said that he'll let me know whenever there's anything going on. He's going to let me know. And I appreciate it because I want to be part of the solution. Yeah, maybe I don't have all the answers, but I might have some ideas, or I don't mind getting out there and marching, doing whatever. You know, we had a high school graduation at Albany High School, and there was like a few council members there, not all 15. You know, I saw Derek there, I saw Corey there, the mayor was there. I mean, I don't have anybody going to Albany High School, but I felt I was part of the community. I wanted to congratulate our 500, oh, Jack, you were there. Jack's daughter graduated. I'm sorry, Jack. You were up and I was waving to you. But, I mean, we are a community, and I think we can build something. Now, the reason I believe sports is the answer, with all these shootings, I know, and again, I don't know the ages, and I'm hearing tonight and I'm understanding a little bit more. One thing that strikes me, you know, and you wonder why, there's not one female involved in this, shooting somebody or getting shot. So I think it's indicative, you know, and I think that's kind of nature that I remember growing up that we would have fights to see who was the toughest in the class. And maybe that's part of it, but that's where sports come in, that instead of using guns to prove who's stronger, that we use sports to do it. So again, I want to cut this short, but thank you so much.
And what I like to do right now to end this session is, Mr. Robinson, can you please do the honors?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. As a council member who is a leader and a representative of one of the wars that has been affected the most by senseless violence, my heart is broken. My spirit is broken. The feeling of hugging a mother who lost her 20-year-old son, the feeling of standing next to a father, next to the casket of his 30-year-old son. It's very heartbreaking. When you go and visit your neighbors to make sure that they're all right after a shooting happened, and you meet a senior in the community and she tells you she just does nothing but stays in the house, my heart is broken. When you visit a neighbor and they tell you and point to the place where the body laid, my heart breaks. There is no one solution to this issue of violence. As many members hinted on tonight, we're dealing with decades and decades and decades of communities that have been overlooked, stepped on, and forgotten about. The solution is going to come from everyone working together on the elected official level and also on the community level. Now is not the time to point blame at whose fault it is. Now is not the time to say, well, it's the mayor's fault, she's not doing enough. Now is not the time to say it's council members' fault, they're not doing enough. Now is not the time to say it's, your next door neighbor's fault because they're not doing enough. I was raised in a single parent home. My father was in and out of jail most of my life. My mother had to work 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table. My grandmother worked 2 or 3 jobs just to help my mother out to raise 4 boys. What helped me become the person that I am today is my community. My community making sure that I wasn't going to be another statistic. My community making sure that they were responsible for me. When I walked down the street and someone seen me, they knew whose child I was. And they were determined to tell me that I better go home before they call my mother. That's what it's going to take to eliminate and mitigate this issue of violence in our communities. It's going to take the input from all of us. No one person has the golden ticket to this solution. So with that, Mr. President, I'm going to ask that we adjourn in silence to remember the families, our communities, and the city of Albany that has been affected by these senseless acts of violence.
So can we stand, please have a moment of silence? Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Meeting is adjourned.